In this video, we're going to look at a Caro-Kann Tartakower game by ChessGoals member MadLuc. He plays the black pieces, and it's a really nice example of how to annotate your game and how to play the Tartakower variation. So stay tuned. Alright, so we have MadLuc here with the black pieces. We see the Caro-Kann. And this is now called the classical variation when black plays d takes e4. And now after knight takes e4, knight f6, this is now called the Tartakower variation. This is what we recommend in the ChessGoals Caro-Kann course. And we always take back with the e-pawn in the course. You can take with the g-pawn, which leads to very interesting games, but I think e takes is a little bit stronger of a move, so that's what we recommend in the course. And now bishop d6, castle, rook e8, this is all right out of the repertoire. Knight d7, took the knight back on f8. And even though we have these doubled f pawns, this is a pretty balanced position, and it gives a lot of play for both sides with this imbalance. A lot of times these kingside pawns can start pushing up the board for black. So we see here white trades, and that's a standard plan you'll see when you play the Tartakower variation as black, is that your opponents will try to trade pieces, thinking that the d-pawn might be an extra pawn in the end, but as long as we keep an eye on the activity, the weak squares, and the kingside play, it's usually a dynamically balanced position, and sometimes we can even come out ahead depending on what white does. So after knight g3, here MadLuc plays bishop e6. This is probably the first mistake of the game, and he notices this in his notes. So one thing I want you guys to pay attention to is how well annotated this game is by MadLuc. So he says here, I played bishop e6 thinking that this was the best way to limit white's activity. So he's looking at using the bishop to kind of eye these squares on the queen side. But he says g6 is more accurate here because it stops a quick f4, f5 by white. And that's exactly right. So if white plays f4 here, it's actually an advantage for white because after g6 now, f5 can still be played, defended by 3 pieces. So this is not what black wants. You don't want that f-pawn getting up to f5 like that. And there's no f5 here for black because white could just capture. Either knight takes, or I'm looking at the computer line, bishop takes is even stronger. It's free pawn for white. So after bishop e6, white misses this strong move f4, plays queen c2, and now MadLuc plays g6, and he says this is the last time I remembered to try and limit white's activity and forgot to play c5 and then bishop e6 to open the center more. Yeah, so that's exactly right. So we want to play c5, opening the center at some point, but we need to start here with g6 because we got to watch out for this f4, f5 plan. So here white plays knight to e4, queen e7, good move, defending f6. There was a fork there. f4, and now f5. So the cool thing with this position is f4 is actually a mistake by white. This looks like a normal strategic idea. Why wouldn't you put the pawn on f4? Black plays f5, and look at this bishop. Same color as all of these pawns. And this bishop on d3 is the opposite color of all of white's pawns. So usually from the white point of view, you'll be thinking, okay, this is good for me, right? I have a good bishop against a bad bishop. But let's look at why this position is better for black. After the move knight g5, bishop d7, here what MadLuc could have played is bishop d5. This bishop is actually not a bad bishop, it's an active bishop. And this knight can be kicked out of g5 later. So really this pawn on f5 is doing a great job shutting down the d3 bishop, while our bishop becomes active on the d5 square. And here let's say white plays a move like c4. Now we play bishop e4, and if there's a trade here, we take back with the f-pawn, followed by a quick f5, and we have a protected passed pawn on e4. And this is giving us really good chances to play for the win. So here MadLuc says he was afraid of knight takes e6 losing the bishop, but that's not a real threat, because why would white exchange such a strong knight for such a bad bishop, light square bishop with the pawns on light squares? Now, I think that's true if the bishop didn't have d5, but MadLuc, I think here bishop d5 is actually a really strong move because of this idea of bringing the bishop into e4. But I agree with you. If you were to ignore this, like let's give rook a to d8. Knight takes e6 is not a very good move for white, because now you have this knight versus bishop imbalance in a position where it's pretty closed up. So this knight should be able to outplay this bishop. So I agree with you. White's not really threatening to take on e6, but I do think bishop d5 would be a nice improvement here. So bishop d7, knight goes back to f3 for white, and now here MadLuc's spots this free pawn. So we have this very solid opening. There's really not a lot of tactics on the board. This is an OTB game, but actually white is dropping a pawn in a position that's pretty quiet. So even though it's not like the most tactical opening that you'll ever play, the Caro-Kann Tartakower, we see here that there's already a tactical error by white dropping this pawn. Queen e3 check, winning f4 on the very next move. So now white plays knight to e5, queen to g5 by black, and I think the plan should probably be to reroute this bishop next, get him back into the game. Queen to b3, hitting this f7 pawn, queen f6. Now, after queen b3, there is a dual threat here. There's queen takes f7, and there's also potential for queen takes b7. So here MadLuc says he played queen f6 as he thought it was the best way to defend f7. He saw bishop e6, which is much stronger than queen f6, but thought it was not a threat as white plays queen takes b7 anyways. Yeah, okay, so the line that he gives here is exactly right. If white goes for the b7 pawn, we can actually play rook b8, take b2, and now we're starting to create our own attack with rook and queen both hitting g2, and the other rook can always come to b8 or come to c8 trying to deflect the queen. This is a very nice position for black. Black has a solid edge here. So after queen f6, queen takes b7. Now white has an advantage because black isn't able to quite get that same pressure. So here he says he played queen d8 as he miscalculated, thought he lost a piece. If rook to b8, knight takes d7, knight takes d7, queen takes d7, but there's this really nice move in the end for black, rook e7, trapping the white queen. So MadLuc did a good job calculating that up to queen takes d7, but if he goes one move deeper, he can realize that there's actually this queen trap in the end. So instead of queen to d8, rook a to b8 would have been a good reply. But queen d8's not really much worse than rook a to b8. So bishop c4. White's again putting pressure here. Rook e7. And we see this trade on c6. And queen d5. So now white is doing a good plan by offering this queen trade, because in this position white has protected pass pawns on both d and c. So black's actually in a lot of trouble here. So what MadLuc needs to do is try to create some play against the white king. Try to attack white. Rook d7, queen f3, knight to e6. He says he played knight e6 to bring the knight into the game, but he saw rook c1 and again thought it was just an idle threat. I think he's talking about rook to c8 here. So yeah, knight e6 does allow bishop takes e6. I think a move like h5 here is pretty interesting because we want to get an attack going against the white king. So let's say rook a to e1 is played. Now we could play a move like rook c8. If the bishop drops back, knight h7, maybe eyeing knight g5. But what we want to do is try to get some play going over here on the king side. So here white should definitely take the knight. Bishop takes e6. He moves the rook, and now MadLuc plays a nice move, knight g5 hitting the queen. And knight to e4. So look at this maneuver. The knight gets to a very strong square on e4, and it's not easy for the white bishop to trade off the knight. That's a great idea, and that's something that you see quite a bit in the Tartakower. The f5 pawn will guard a knight outpost on e4. Queen back to c2. And here now MadLuc's starts trying to reroute his pieces. He says he miscalculated bishop takes e4 thinking that it lost a pawn. But let's say a move like queen d6 was played and white goes for this pawn. There's actually this nice in-between move stacking the rooks down the e file. There's nowhere for this bishop to go, so white has to make another move here. Now we take back. And now we get this pass pawn that's a potentially protected pass pawn if f5 is played, which would be our plan. Alright, so white tries to double. Queen c7, black doubles. And even though white is up one pawn, so black has 2 extra kingside pawns, white has 3 extra queenside pawns, even though white is up one pawn, black does have a little bit of compensation for it. Because again, this knight has the potential to be stronger than this bishop if it can get to this e4 outpost safely. Alright, so we see MadLuc is trying to get some play going with the kingside pawns. Makes sense. But now this queen sinks into e5. Black is in trouble. Queen trade offer, queen e8 check. And here black resigned. So MadLuc ended up losing this game. But if we go back, there's a couple of really nice learning points here. Bishop to e6. So first mistake. Watch out for this idea f4, f5. If g6 is played here instead of bishop e6, the game is pretty much equal. If f4 is played by white here, now f5, and this is an advantage for black. And I'm going to plan to show more sample games in the Tartakower because I think there's a lot of questions on this line. You know, why does black have the advantage here? But this is a 1.2 to 1.3 stockfish advantage already. This is definitely something that we want to see in the Tartakower. These white pieces are not well placed. This knight on f8 has a lot of potential. This e5 square can be kicked by f6, so if that knight ever finds its way to e5, there's always f6. There's no way to kick our knight if we get to e4, so that's a nice little difference. But yeah, I'm going to plan to show more Tartakower middle games because I think they're really instructive. And out of our whole Caro-Kann course, I think the Tartakower lines are the most important to learn the middle games because they're just not as intuitive as some of the other lines. For example, the exchange variation I think is very intuitive for black. So then the next kind of important point is right around here with bishop d7. I think bishop d5, white's got a very nice advantage in this position. And this is one where we could play it out and try a couple different lines, play it out with the engine, see what it thinks for black. But again, we're looking at over a 1 pawn advantage for black. And winning this pawn was good. And I think this is kind of the last critical point. Spotting that bishop e6 is a strong idea, allowing queen takes b8, allowing the queen to take another pawn, and then playing rook takes b2 with all this pressure on the g2 pawn. An idea of rook c8 is also in the air, immediately winning back this pawn on c3. So again here, over a 1 pawn advantage for black. So I think this is a good example of how well the Tartakower can work in getting a nice advantage for black right out of the opening. But we'll just need to keep, as Tartakower players, we'll need to keep playing Tartakower middle games and seeing the ideas and learning the plans and just game after game, keep reviewing them. And that's one of the benefits of playing a lot of games. Like you can memorize openings. You can get to this position where you know you're equal, or maybe even your theory gets you to this point and you know that black already has an advantage. But what good is an advantage if you have a little bit of trouble figuring out what's the plan going forward? So the more games you play, the more games you analyze and create takeaways, the easier it is for you in the future games to find those good plans. So if you're interested in the Tartakower course, check the links in the description below. There's a link to our Caro-Kann page that has chapter previews of all the chapters. I think each video is like 45 to 50 minutes. There's 9 chapters. And we have a PGN file included. We have bonus content. You get into our Discord server. You can ask Caro-Kann questions in the Discord channel. We have a ton of ChessGoals members all playing the Caro-Kann now because of this course. So if you like the video, please give it a thumbs up. If you're not a subscriber, please click the subscribe button. We're trying to hit 1,000 subs by the end of the year. And then yeah, check out our links in the description below. Check out the Caro-Kann course. Consider joining ChessGoals. It's $5 a month through Patreon. We also have premium study plans. And I appreciate you guys watching, and we'll see you in the next video.